Better to kind of think of a way so I can ask the questions and not have you twist your head back and forth.
Sure. I'll just
Yeah,
answer
no,
the
absolutely.
question.
So, you can just make sure on that. But, yeah,
I'll start rolling.
yeah, okay. So we can just start, John O'Connor, it was 1900, and when I looked, trying to find, what, would make him want to make a deal with the crooks, because he, I didn't see any evidence of any real, crime that exceeds what you might find in any other major city. What did you see that made him want to make a deal with the crooks?
No one knows why Police Chief John O'Connor created the O'Connor system, or they call it the layover agreement, the deal between the crooks and the gangsters. It's clear that by shortly after the turn of the century, so 1906, 1909, the contract between the crooks and the cops was sealed. Yeah. And it lasted until about 1934-35, after the kidnapping of William Hamm, the kidnapping of Ed Bremer, the destruction of the gang, the killing of the Dillinger gang in 34-35. It would have lasted longer, but the FBI came in and did what the police in St. Paul never did. The people of St. Paul and the police of St. Paul tolerated the O'Connor system for almost 3 decades. If it hadn't been for the FBI, as troublesome as the FBI was, it would have continued another decade. And we don't know why O'Connor did it. I mean, I'm assuming it's greed, because the O'Connor system was based on bribes. It was 3 decades of bribes paid to judges, prosecutors, O'Connor himself, senators, governors. So it was based on corruption, sealed with illicit cash. So that's why the O'Connor system was good for the cops, because it added to their income. Why O'Connor himself did it, we don't know.
I mean, it wasn't,
I would say, not to interrupt you,
yeah.
you're tending to look down on him.
Yeah. Do you want to stand over there?
Otherwise,
Sure,
otherwise behind him.
I'll stand.
That would be great. Yeah.
Stand right behind the camera if you would. I think that would be the best.
Yeah.
This would be good for you then?
That would be great.
Okay.
Right behind, just directly right behind it.
Because that
Directly
way I'm
right
staring
behind it.
right toward
So,
the camera.
so if he's looking at you, we won't be able to tell. He's going to look like he's addressing the viewer.
Okay.
So like right behind it.
Okay, so this is just good for you? Yeah.
No, right here. Just right here.
Oh, right here?
Yep, stand
okay.
right in front of it. Here, let me adjust this
Okay.
for you.
Right.
I'll go right to the left.
There you go. Because the camera's not moving too much, or it's not moving at all, so
Okay.
I don't have to.
Okay.
The only thing I would worry about is make sure you don't rustle those papers when you get near it.
Okay.
But that's
Yeah.
pretty much it.
Yeah, well, okay. Was there, so there wasn't really any corruption before O'Connor actually took,
No.
I mean, enough so that it would merit, someone to consider this.
The Twin Cities had a rich history of corruption that went back into the 1900s. Minneapolis was better known for its corruption. There were national books and articles written about the corruption of Minneapolis. So there was corruption, but it wasn't until the O'Connor system was passed that the corruption was systematized. And it wasn't until Prohibition was passed that suddenly all that money, liquor money, millions of dollars worth of liquor money, became bribe money. So suddenly, petty anti-crooks became millionaires, and in order to stay millionaires, they paid massive bribes to cops, judges, etc. So the corruption was there in the Twin Cities, going long before the O'Connor system. It was the O'Connor system that established the corruption. It was Prohibition that fueled the corruption and turned the underworld into $1 million business.
Now, he seemed to rule, pretty much.
Can I interrupt one more time? I apologize, Kari.
Yeah.
Do you want to have your shoulders square? Square.
Oh, square? Sure.
Yeah, just straight ahead, I think.
You bet.
There you go.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, got it.
Got it. I'm going to adjust the camera slightly here. A little bit taller now. There we go.
Go for it.
Now, I mean, he seemed to rule. He pretty much, kept things under control. I mean, the crooks from the sound that the crooks didn't, you know, they were kept in line essentially. The thing is, when I read about, Tom Brown, it seemed to be, Tom Brown was someone who would kind of, it's like he'd tell the crooks when they're, he'd be a participant, in what. I mean, like with Carpus, he would tell people when they were onto them, unlike O'Connor, it was a little more, chaotic and a little the iron hand that Sean O'Connor had, it seemed to kind of wither away after Tom Brown took power a little bit, yeah.
I'm not sure what your question is.
Oh, well, I guess, how was O'Connor? How was he different from the way Tom Brown operated?
Sure. Tom Brown easily was the most corrupt cop in the history of St. Paul. Tom Brown really brought the underworld and the police together. So the kidnap squad, Tom Brown was the head of the kidnap squad. The idea of the St. Paul Police Kidnap Squad was they would identify those millionaires in St. Paul who were likely to be kidnapped and then protect them. But Tom Brown had a different idea. He decided to identify the rich men in St. Paul and then finger them, point them out to the Barker Karpus gang so they could be kidnapped for ransom. So Tom Brown literally turned the police into an arm of the Barker Karpus gang and the Dillinger gang and the crooks. And that was very different. I don't think O'Connor imagined that a cop could actually fuse the underworld and the overworld together in St. Paul. But that's what Tom Brown did.
Huh. No, okay. And let's see. Now, now obviously, when Karpus did show up, and because it was already 1930s, and it took. I remember they killed a cop in Missouri, and I mean they had committed all these bank robberies and stuff, and I guess how can I say it took the killing of a cop to actually have them flee. I mean, obviously St. Paul was well known as a haven for the crooks. I mean, it was, and I mean Dillinger was obviously, he was in Chicago where and now when they came, it was actually Al Capone's men that brought the idea of the kidnapping of Ham in the first place, from what I understand.
It seems that Fred Ziegler, who had a great nickname, Machine Gun Goetz or Shotgun George Goetz,
yeah,
or something like that. But Fred Ziegler, who had been part of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre team that shot the Bugs Moran gang for Capone, it seems that he was involved in the planning of the kidnapping of William Ham for $100,000 ransom, and then may have been involved in the kidnapping of Ed Bremer as well. But certainly there was local talent. It was Creepy Karpus himself, it was Freddie and Doc Barker, and then it was a local guy, Jack Pfeiffer, who owned the Hollyhocks Club in St. Paul. So it was the national hoodlums, Barker and Karpus, and then the local guys who had, would be able to deal with the ransom payment. Because suddenly you get local. What do you do with the money when they pay the $200,000 ransom for Ed Bremer? You need someone to launder the money. And Harry Sawyer, for instance, was the local crook who knew how to launder money. The great thing about St. Paul is it was literally a Walmart for crooks. If you needed a getaway car that was heavily armored, that had a police radio installed in the getaway car so you could hear if the police were coming after you after a bank robbery. You could buy a fully outfitted bank robber's getaway car in St. Paul. If you wanted a Thompson submachine gun, the best Tommy guns in America were flown from Texas to St. Paul and sold on Wabasha Street near the Green Lantern Saloon. And if you wanted a girl, Alvin Karpus met the love of his life, Dolores Delaney, here in St. Paul. So there were other places in America that were safe havens. Cicero, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, Capone's Place, Hot Springs, Arkansas. But really, if you were a crook, the place you wanted to go to get arms, a girl, a getaway car, learn which bank to knock over was St. Paul.
Yeah, as I kind of mentioned to you in the email, it seemed like the hired hands are kind of interchangeable. They'd work with different people. So the same ones that worked at Carpus also were associated with John Dillinger and.
Right.
So
some of the local guys. I had heard, and people have heard a rumor that the Dillinger gang and the Barker Carpus gang, at one point, both of which lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, that they would join forces and become the Dillinger, Barker, Carpus gang. Apparently, Carpus thought that was stupid. He thought that the Dillinger gang were more homicidal than the Barker Carpus gang. On a scale, the Dillinger liked to shoot, which is true, and the Barker Carpus gang liked to plan. And if you read Alvin Carpus's autobiography, he doesn't come off as a psychopath, a little bit of a sociopath, but he doesn't come off as a nut job. Whereas Babyface Nelson, who was a member of the John Dillinger gang, was a psychopath. He liked to take out a machine gun and kill people. Carpus liked to make money. He didn't like to kill people. He liked to make money. So I think the two gangs weren't a good fit.
yeah, and also in the beginning, he kind of explicitly said he didn't want to be a hired hand, and it was the thrill of being able to kidnap someone.
Yeah.
And what I've seen, no one was, as far as the money, no one, it seemed like no one had, was able to, locate it after.
Right. The striking thing is that none of the ransom money from the two kidnappings in 1933 and 1934 was ever recovered. That was in 1930s cash, $300,000. So it's probably worth 1.6 million or so today. Apparently, the ransom money was put for, I think it was Bremer, in a can in Zumbrota, Minnesota. So the cash, roughly $200,000, probably it was split, put in a can and buried under a gate or a fence in Zumbrota, Minnesota. So if you go to Zumbrota today, you'll still see people with metal detectors who will be running it along the fences of Zumbrota, hoping to find some portion of the $200,000 ransom that was paid by the Bremer family, the Bremers, to free Ed Bremer. It's not there. The money that the Barker Carpus gang stole from the banks and got as ransom loot for their kidnappings was laundered far away from here, most likely